What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Healthspan Academy. I'm your host, Craig Shearhart, and joining me today is Dr. Leilani van Koten, who's an expert in sound therapy and producing and helping people function better mentally and physically. We're going to talk about her company, her initiatives, and how she helps her clients function better. Leilani, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks. Welcome. Yes, I'm delighted to be here, Craig. Good to meet you.
Great to catch up. So I want to start this off with your background academically. You have a background in medicine. I want to talk a little about how you started in that and then sort of transition into this new field.
Sure. Yes. Well, I grew up in a science family. Both my parents are scientists, biologists. But then I think that, my take on that is very much wanting to work with people. So the way that I married that as a teenager was to think, well, science and academia was strong as well, and how to bring in health, well-being, and growth. So I did gravitate to medicine, which seemed to make sense at the time.
Right.
I think that that as I went through the medical training, I hit against some of the conceptual limits, the paradigm limits of the quite mechanistic approach to illness and possibly not even health.
Right.
And I was more interested in
sick care versus healthcare.
Yes. And I was very young, but beginning to become more conscious of this desire to look at well-being. What does well-being actually mean? Yeah. And also, why are people ill, and what's the meaning behind that? And from a spiritual perspective, and so very early strands of those narratives sort of merging, and me gradually waking up to some of the deeper questions there.
Right.
And I do remember one thing was instead of I was on a placement on a hospital ward, and I was meant to be studying for final exams, and I remember sneaking a homeopathy book in and reading it, kind of to keep me going, because I was thirsty for something else,
right?
And it wasn't being met in that context.
Fair enough. That's really interesting that you're basically cheating on school with different school. That's I can picture Einstein when he was supposed to do his studying, and he was like publishing his papers on E equals MC squared and all that good stuff. So how did this lead into sound medicine, what it is today?
Well, I was a young hospital doctor and got thoroughly burnt out, basically.
Fair enough.
And then began my own journey. I got burnt out both because it's exceptionally rigorous, in the hours and demands in that job, but also because it wasn't meeting my heart, my passion, my inspiration, or my sense of rightness. And I probably couldn't have articulated that at that time. But anyway, that was the beginning of my seeking inquiry around alternative therapies. I also trained as a psychotherapist and did that for a while as well.
Oh, wow.
But, through that journey, I acquired a very different paradigm or perspective on well-being, and was looking more and more at, well, what is the meaning? What is the invitation? What is the spiritual journey that I am being tugged into,
right?
Or anyone, life brings us challenges, but how do we grow through them, and what are they actually offering?
Right.
So then I met Peter Chappell in 2014, and I had encountered a wide range of alternative therapies and was like, this is an interesting other one. But when it began to click, there's something that does grab me here slightly differently, is partly because of the way that the resonances can be carried both in a liquid, like homeopathy can be made into pills, and embedded in a digital file, an audio file. And that then opens a whole window of opportunities in terms of being able to reach people, and potentially reach people in an accessible and affordable way large numbers of people quickly.
Yeah.
So, for instance, that comes around to the Ukraine war, where we have a mass exodus of refugees and a mass population in real dire need, and what can be offered there quickly in large numbers. So I was really taken by that potential, having worked as a counselor, a psychotherapist, one-to-one for some time, and then thinking, well, how can more people be helped more?
Right. I love that. So just going through the website, like a lot of the initiatives has kind of been started through third world nations, I assume, where resources are a little limited, and sound is one of the few things that maybe they have access to. So talk through some of those clinical issues that are being addressed in those populations, and how your therapy kind of helps them through that. Yeah,
sure. And I'll just add another really inspiring element of this work, and partly why it was brought into being, was when Peter he went to Africa to work with HIV and people with AIDS way back in 2002.
Right.
And he was a homeopath, having previously been an engineer. Interesting.
That's a really interesting path.
Interesting journey. How do things work? Okay, how do people work? You know. So,
love that.
So he went to Africa and treated, I don't know, almost 100 people, one-to-one, HIV, a big clinic, lots of cases. But the problem is you need trained homeopaths to identify what each individual person needs. And they aren't there in Africa, and there aren't the resources to do that training. And it's complex training. And he was like, how can I help mass numbers of people, which was part of the inspiration of inviting in, I prefer that phrase, inviting in these residents, who's doing the creating here. Yeah. So in Africa, the first resonance was one for people with HIV.
Okay.
And then following Peter went to one of his patients who was in the process of dying from HIV, and said, I've been helping you with homeopathy for a while. It's helped a little, but I don't think it's going to do the job.
Right.
You could try this. Was
this being approached as like palliative care, or?
Some people were getting better, but this particular person was not. So yes, he was supporting them in a palliative way, but also looking for other options, and basically said to her, we can continue that way, or you could try this thing. I don't know how it will be and whether it will work. And she said, let's just try it. And from that day on, she, it changed. She slowly turned around and began to improve. And it wasn't long before she was then able to go back to, she had a little store where she served tea and things in a market.
Oh, wow.
And she was able to go back to doing that and supporting her children. And, that kept happening, that kind of thing.
Right.
So, it took quite a while for Peter to kind of absorb that and believe that. And then he met up with a doctor in the Netherlands, Dr. Harry van der Zee, who again thought, oh, this sounds amazing, but I don't know whether can I believe it. And then he went out to Africa and did see the results. And they founded the charity, AMA Resonance Healing Foundation, ARHF. So that charity now does still work with HIV, with particular emphasis on malaria prevention and treatment. A lot of work in schools. They also have a schools LEAP program, Learning Enhancement Africa program, which works with a range of infectious diseases, psychological traumas, and then also concentration and focus. And it's amazing because you get the attendance going up, and you get behavioral issues in classroom going down, and you get educational exam scores going up, and you get entrance to university and further education going from none to top of the range.
Yeah.
So it's been remarkable.
That's incredible.
And then the job was to bring that more to the West.
Right.
And we're a different population.
Mm-hmm.
There's more layering. We have the cultural issue of maybe being less connected above and below,
right.
The earth and spirit, and actually
more critical, more kind of probably doubtful, I guess, of that kind of stuff. It's probably a longer path to get people to buy in. There's
that as well. And there's a lot of toxins and lifestyle issues. Mm-hmm. And so there's layers of things.
Right.
And we do find that I work with the resonances in general. Most of what's been done in the West is one-to-one practitioner work. Mm-hmm. And we work with, like, okay, if someone has a chronic, in Africa, it's mostly infectious diseases,
right.
Sometimes traumas.
Mm-hmm.
In the West, it's mostly chronic, deeply embedded.
Yeah, inflammatory disease, yeah.
Yeah. And there's layers and layers of stuff to work through. Mm-hmm. But we have a system where there are revealer resonances for revealing and resolving the patterns behind chronic conditions.
Right.
And then if you pair them up with looking at underlying issues, well, what maybe led into that? What was happening at the time when that started developing? Mm-hmm. Or what's the family history? Or what are the traumas or toxins or infections that might have not been fully resolved and then kind of coalesce or congeal into a chronic illness?
Right.
And so we pair things up. And the other thing is to also look at, so what is the person needing to release, but also what are they ready to receive?
Right.
And so, what are they maybe wanting to welcome into their life? And illness can be our inner self speaking to us in a metaphorical form.
Right.
So, we've got so much language, and I'm not a linguist, but I know that other languages apart from English have so many metaphors around, like, stomach it, or it gets stuck in my throat, or the pain in the neck, or what a headache, or
So true. Yeah, that's right.
There's so much language around metaphor of illness, and these things can often be help us to gain insight into what actually may be at the root cause of the chronic condition.
Very cool. So this is almost like kind of merging the mind body kind of interaction and helping these people control it better with their mentality and seeping through into their habits. Is that sort of what we're seeing at this point?
I certainly think that's always a really helpful element in a healing journey, is the deepening self-awareness. I think that the resonance work is kind of like an invitation to an energetic reset.
Okay.
It's like, the resonances are, if you imagine kind of a field of energy that is invited or held or named or created, and then listening to the resonance is kind of, it's like a telephone line to tap into that resonance field. Right. And there are so many ways to do this. I mean, it's not simply an affirmation, but to use that parallel. And an affirmation is a way of tapping into the energy and intention of certain words. Now, with the one with the source resonances, there's a pre-created, some of the work's been done for you in a sense. There's this energy field that has been invited in. You just have to accept the invitation and become synced with it, essentially. Yes. Right. Yes. Cool. You got it. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the research. I'm hearing a lot of, like, just in what I know about meditation, I'm seeing a lot of parallels there. In meditation now, there's irrefutable evidence that there's these kind of benefits just to, focus and mental health and sports performance. The list goes on and on. Sleep, all that stuff. We know it's good for us. I feel like the research in this field is still a little bit newer. So talk about how much we know about what is going on with this methodology in terms of, like, some of the scientific literature, some of the technical development that's gone into the whole process. Yes. I mean, you're absolutely right that I love how there is more and more research coming out underpinning what basically wisdom teachings through the ages have been saying.
Right.
And like meditation, helps. Oh yeah, now we can tick that box.
Yeah.
And also like the quantum physics approach. I'm no expert, but quantum physics does touch on the transcendent. Saying, there are infinite ways that any one moment could manifest in. The collapse of the wave function.
Parallel universe theory, yeah.
And all is possible until the wave function collapses into what manifests in this moment.
Right.
And that just is it's a different language, but if you look at the meaning behind it, it maps perfectly onto wisdom traditions.
Right.
And teachings through the ages. But it's wonderful that science is now actually, pinning some of this down in language that is maybe more accessible within our shared, our dominant paradigm.
Right.
So yes, there is, the simple act of listening to an audio resonance, they're 1 minute long, although sometimes people can listen longer, and taking that moment of pausing and really tuning in and being present and opening up to whatever it is that the resonance is for, opening up to that essence, that can be a very meditative experience. Some people, it's useful to embody it and move or shake or sigh to actually help that in, allow that in, because particularly in the West, I think we're like a little bit on edge and maybe not tuning in as much.
Yeah, we're just way overstimulated. It's that's like, I think most people's issue with meditation is they just can't get there, so they don't get the real result. They're constantly in that sympathetic state. So that first step really is, can you get yourself in that parasympathetic state where you're like open to being present in your stimulus and your surroundings? Is that sort of the first prereq to get the benefit here?
I'm sure it helps. And some people use the resonances as pills, and they just take them and aren't doing that tuning in. So, and they still work. So,
interesting.
And they work on animals, and
Wow. So it's almost like bypassing conscious into your conscious mind. Is that like one of the theories and how that's working? Or like, do we know about how and the why yet?
Yeah, the how and the why. I'd like to make a cautious analogy with homeopathy. Okay. So the source resonances evolved out of homeopathy and do share some fundamental concepts with the homeopathic approach. I said cautious because I want to be respectful of homeopathy, and I know that for some people it's really important to be clear that source resonances are not homeopathy.
Right.
But it's like the ancestry.
Sure.
So I'm not a homeopath. But with creating a homeopathic remedy, you take a physical substance, crush it down, and shake it in a certain way to embed the energy field of that substance in the liquid. Now, there is no physical substance left once it has been created, or it's so little that it can't be detected. That's what I have understood in most homeopathy.
Okay.
That in itself is radical.
That is wild.
That is really wild.
Yeah.
But it's like that's the quantum world. It's like it's the world of energy that I think that quantum physics has actually touched on so much, but it hasn't percolated through to even the scientific paradigm.
Yeah, a lot of it's still theoretical because we can't observe. It's the whole point, is we can't observe it. So it's like almost infinite theories that we're trying to merge and get the model to work. But it's it's wild.
Yeah. Cool. And so On you go.
I was just going to say, so we talked about this beforehand, that as a musician, I'm really curious to know, is there certain, like, what does the resonance encompass? Is it certain frequencies, tones? How do we establish that resonance? How is the actual like audio itself? What goes into that design?
Yeah. So let me just go back to the homeopathy.
Sure.
And then it leads into what you've just asked. So with homeopathy, you take a physical substance and then have a mechanical system for extracting the energy field of that substance.
Right.
Amazing. So with source resonances, we take the miraculous and incredible a step further to say, well, okay, so there is an energy field around something. So can we actually just tap in direct into that energy field and request a connection between that energy field and this carrier medium, the liquid, say.
Right.
So that's how the first resonances were made. And then the liquid, as with homeopathy, can be used to make pills, the homeopathic pillules.
Okay.
So that bit of it is very similar to homeopathy. Then, Peter and Harry and Eric have worked with that for some time. And then about 10 or 12 years later, Peter was looking at the issue of epidemic illness and how to reach large populations quickly. And from his, remember I mentioned he was an engineer. From his engineering background, he was thinking, well, maybe there's another way of embedding the resonance field. So you've got this resonance energy field that's embedded in a liquid. Well, how about the same resonance energy field, but requesting that it be embedded in a digital file?
Right.
So the interesting thing is that then the digital file, the audio, is simply a carrier, just like the water alcohol mix in a homeopathy bottle is just a carrier.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's so crazy.
Although you introduced this as sound therapy, I would like, in respect of all the wonderful sound therapists, to say, well, this is slightly different so that people aren't confused. This is using sound as a carrier medium for
the resonance itself.
Modality.
Right. Yeah. That is wild. It's still trying to wrap my head around that. Cool. Yeah. So basically,
I'll just finish that.
Sure.
Is that Peter then started making the resonances as audios, and then was able to take them to clinics in Africa and give people headsets and see changes. For instance, someone who had I think it was cataracts for many years was then listened to resonance and was then able to just begin to see glimmers of light,
right?
And had been blind. And then they tested it. RHF tested it with the School's LEAP program, which is entirely audios. And I mentioned the results to that earlier. Okay, so you had another question.
Let's talk. I think we've talked a little bit about how and why this works. Let's get into the mobile app that you have going on and how that is delivered. Is it still is that out now? Is that still in development?
No, that has, yes. So we are working on a Source Sound app, which will be a wonderful combination of providing delivery of the audio resonances and also a research tool. And the idea is to have an app that actually collects and collates information, because one of the things that we have had difficulty with over the years is how to access, collect and collate large numbers, large amounts of data to get some solid reports done. We have some, but it would be great to have more.
Sure. So, and your reports are just your basically outcome measures, like the success rate. Is that like what you're hoping to get out of it, or like the scores of performance, or what is the outcome measure for that?
Yeah. Yeah, well, it will depend on what the issue is. Mm-hmm. There has been a pilot study. A pilot study on diabetes type 2 has been done with about 15 clients. And then, so we were using biometrics. We were using the blood sugar measurements.
Okay.
And also you can use blood tests if participants are mm-hmm. getting blood tests anyway, you can put them in. But with the diabetes study, many of the clients, you can see their blood sugars coming down and stabilizing over time.
That's
and
wild.
Then
you think of it such as a diet, well, at least type 2, you think of diet lifestyle, but it's wild that this therapy is having a similar effect. That's pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah. And then what we noticed was, because the initial trial was done without diet and lifestyle advice. Mm-hmm. So initially they were just getting the resonance.
Right.
And in that particular case, the practitioner early on in the study wasn't actually doing the paired prescribing with looking up the underlying issues. That came mm-hmm. in later. But even with just that resonance, they were beginning to stabilize. They were having less of the erratic blood sugar. And then several people had kind of spontaneous changes in diet and lifestyle. I mean, they all know.
It's like that first step. I guess that gives them the first little bit of momentum, so that it's you would think it would happen. Okay, this is getting better. Now they're more motivated, they're less sluggish, and a lot of stuff. Those other pieces start to fix themselves. So that's really exciting.
And the beautiful thing was that they'd tried lifestyle and diet changes in the past, and it had been a real uphill struggle. Right. But this time, the result we were getting is, oh yeah, I just wanted to do that, and it was easy.
Yeah,
it's that inner shift. Do you remember I was
getting
saying
over that
about
first hurdle?
Yeah, about the energy, kind of the energetic reset. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like it's resetting something deep in core,
right?
That allows things to flow in a different way. Mm-hmm. So that's been a really interesting study. I would love us to be doing more. There is one, there's an HIV study that the charity RHF has done, and it is going through the stages of getting published currently. But that's a remarkable study which shows, takes 3 groups of people. One group has just the drug therapy, antiretroviral drugs, ARVs. One group has just the resonance, and one group has both. Now, it was not a double-blind controlled study.
It'd be tough to do, yeah.
Couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And the populations were very different. So the people with the ARVs were coming through clinics and hospitals. The people with the resonances were in remote villages.
So a few compounding variables.
Yeah. And were generally less well at the start, because these ones had the drug treatment. Mm-hmm. But despite that, the people with just the resonances did best on 3 counts.
That's unbelievable. It's very cool. Obviously, there's something to this.
They studied immune, the CD4 count, the immune strength. They studied the viral load, the amount of virus detectable, and they studied weight. And on all 3 counts, the resonance performed best, which is amazing.
That's very incredible. Cool. Yeah. So the world's in kind of a crazy place right now. And aside from the pandemic, we've got like a pending situation in Ukraine and Russia. Obviously, that's like slowly impacting the rest of the world. So, and I know you've started some initiatives to help people through that, not only that are war victims themselves, but the population and how to deal with that. Talk me through that whole process and those initiatives.
Okay, thanks, Craig. So the first thing I did was offering a resonance for peace in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. So, and this is available through our social media, Facebook and Instagram, and on our website. And the invitation is for all of us to listen to resonance and collectively build this field of support
and peace.
For peace in Ukraine. And the more, it's like and there already is worldwide, there's this huge support. So we'll be tapping in and building with all the other meditations and prayers and everything that people are already doing. And the resonances are kind of give that an enhancer boost or something.
Right.
You know, it's like we tap in and then we've got the support of the resonance field to kind of potentiate that our presence in that way.
Awesome.
So
very cool.
And you know, joining together to do something like that multiplies the effectiveness, the power of it.
Yeah, and it gives you a sense of control and camaraderie and like a little bit of feeling of togetherness, which we're definitely in a deficit of that right now. I feel like the world is just totally polarized in both directions. So I love that initiative. Very cool.
So awesome. Welcoming everyone to join with us in that. And then looking at, I've made a page with a set of first aid resonances for people who have been impacted by the war. And so I'm just at the beginnings of trying to get that out. So, cool. You know, anyone who has contacts with anyone who's been affected and the refugees, then that's something that can be spread around and shared as widely as possible.
That's awesome.
And then the third thing, which will take a little longer, but I'm beginning to work on a program for supporting people more longer term with war trauma, with the effects of war trauma and the effects of being a refugee, the whole experience of being a refugee.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. Yeah.
We've already had a number of practitioners who've used the resonances really effectively with refugees a range of refugees in the past. It's complex because sometimes they were in camps and only saw someone once. And so the follow-up is tricky.
Right.
But by developing a program where we can then keep in touch with people, then we can offer a longer-term support.
I love that. That sounds like an awesome initiative. Are there other initiatives going on with Source Medicine? What's on tap for the rest of the 2022 for you guys?
Well, we a couple of months ago, we launched a self-acceptance program. And
awesome.
That was on the back of some work that we did with 3 different groups using a set of inner growth resonances. And the feedback we got from the groups encouraged us then to think, well, okay, we can put this together as a program. So the program actually includes listening to resonances and also some exercises, some inner growth and personal development exercises, meditations, breath work, things like that. And awesome. People get an email with instructions each day for 6 weeks.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So
cool.
the initial feedback from that is really positive, and the resonances the themes that we're working with there is self-acceptance, and then building into loving self and forgiveness of self and others, and then towards the end looking at healthy boundaries, because all of these 4 themes fit together really closely.
Right.
And fundamentally, self-acceptance. I mean, one thing we know, we are with ourselves all our lives. So how we feel about that is gonna have a really big impact on our experience of life.
For sure. Yeah, that's relationship with yourself. If you don't have it, you can't expect to have a great relationship with anybody, in my opinion, anyways. So I love that. Let's talk a little bit about Leilani's personal habits, and we are in a kind of crazy world right now. So, and it's easy to get lost, especially I find when you're somewhat of a practitioner or a health coach or in that field, you can kind of get pulled in a lot of different directions. You see yourself as almost like a guinea pig to try this stuff out. But like your health has to come first to some degree anyway. So talk me through what your personal priorities are around your own health and well-being and what your habits look like around that.
Yes. Thank you, Craig. So with having experienced burnout earlier in my life, you know, I learned a fair bit there about being able to really tune in and check in with myself and be aware of, how actually am I? I'm getting a bit like thin on the energy, you know, and notice. For one thing about being healthful or health mindful is the awareness. And how am I?
Yeah.
Kind of the first step to, okay, and what am I going to do about that?
Yeah. If you wait for the symptoms to hit you, it's almost too late. You have to like look for them actively, right?
Yeah. And that person self-checking in. So I think that's become quite a strong habit, which it only came to mind when you asked me the questions, like, oh yeah, I do that. I've done that for decades. Like that real tuning in to, I check in with myself.
Yeah, fair enough.
And then I am really fortunate to live in a beautiful country location where, walks, being outside, gardening outside in group, actually. So I get the social connection and a sense of shared endeavor, growing our vegetables in a shared garden. And I also get the physical work, or on the days when I tune in and think, I need to go a little slow, then I can be potting and planting. But other days I can be shoveling the manure and the compost and digging the heavy weeds.
The fun stuff.
Yeah. So that's great. And then I also use the source resonances. And like I was saying earlier, there is the impact of the resonances themselves, and there is also the impact of the actual act of listening. I use exclusively the audios, and it gives that pause and that reflection. And then I also do that just by pausing and listening, and I can almost always hear birdsong. That's delightful where I live. Or looking at the landscape and the weather outside, and that's tuning in and the resourcing through nature.
Right, just getting fully present. I love that. Fantastic, awesome. Well, Leilani, this has been a fantastic chat. I really appreciate your time. What's the best place for people to learn more about your business and your initiatives?
Well, we have our website, sourcemedicine.zone. And also we have a presence on Facebook and Instagram, and a newsletter. Do sign up for a newsletter.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll link to all your goodies in the show notes.
Thank you.
Well, again, appreciate your time. This has been an awesome chat. Hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Thank you, Craig.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in to Healthspan Academy, guys. We'll see you next time. Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for tuning in today. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Thank you so much for supporting this channel. This has been a fun project. We're growing in viewership every single week, and we obviously couldn't do that without you. So thank you for continuing to tune in. I really hope you're getting value out of the programming and the content. Just wanted to give you a heads up. I've been working on a book on health and longevity the last couple of years, been collaborating with my colleague, Dr. Dan Vitale, who's an expert in the field as well. And we've basically just kind of summarized the literature, some of the techniques that we found really useful in the world of biohacking, what our exercise regimen looks like, what's, cardio type stuff is going to help us live longer and healthier, mobility work, nutrition. We've covered the whole spectrum, everything that you can basically be in control of in your health and fitness kind of moving forward to help you live as healthily as possible for as long as possible. And it's available free for download. So if you click on the YouTube banner, you'll see a link to download the blueprint. It's also on our Instagram profile or on the website. You can click on 5pillarmethod.com/optimize to get your free copy of the book. And I hope you enjoy it. Hope you're keeping well. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.